You keep wondering why everyone's pulling away. Why the ones you gave your heart to suddenly go silent. Why you're surrounded by people, but feel completely unseen. But what if this isn't abandonment? What if it's Allah gently removing every voice? So you'll finally hear the one that's been calling you all along. Because when Allah wants your full attention, He doesn't shout. He clears the room. One, you were surrounded, but starving. You were surrounded by people. But somehow, you still felt invisible. They talked to you. They laughed with you. They even said they loved you. But when you went home and the world got quiet, so did their words. So did their presence. And that silence, it hit harder than anything else. You looked around at all the connections in your life and thought, then why do I feel so empty? It's because your heart was never built to survive off attention. It was built to breathe in remembrance. Your soul was never meant to be filled with conversations. It was designed to be nourished by revelation. You weren't craving people. You were craving peace. The kind of peace that can't be bought, can't be earned from others, and can't be faked. You tried to be everything to everyone. You were the listener, the helper, the one who kept it all together. You smiled even when you were breaking. You showed up even when no one noticed you were running on empty. You kept giving your energy away, thinking maybe, just maybe, someone would finally give it back. But no one did, because they can't. They were never meant to fill a void they didn't create. And Allah was watching the whole time. Watching you search for peace in people who were just passing through. Watching you try to fix the ache in your soul with temporary smiles. Watching you chase closeness from hearts that were never fully open. That ache inside of you, the heaviness you can't explain. It's not weakness. It's your soul remembering what it truly needs. It's your soul crying, I miss my Lord. You can be in the middle of a crowd and still feel like no one truly sees you. You can have dozens of people messaging you and still feel unheard, because none of it means anything if your heart isn't connected to the one who created it. And the truth is, until you turn back to Allah, fully, deeply, quietly, you will always feel like something is missing. That something is sujood. That something is Qur'an that speaks right into your wound. That something is a tear falling on the prayer mat in a room where no one sees you, but Allah does. That something is peace that doesn't need proof. You've been starving, not because you lacked attention, but because you lacked alignment. Your heart was pointed in the wrong direction, and now Allah is gently guiding you back. He's removing the noise, He's shrinking the crowd, not because He wants you to be alone, but because He wants you to finally come home. Not to people, not to this world, but to Him. Because when Allah becomes your first connection, you will never feel disconnected again, even if the whole world goes silent. 2. Allah waited until you stopped running. You kept running from your pain, from your past, from your loneliness, from the silence inside you that you didn't know how to face. You filled your days with noise, scrolling, talking, planning, pretending. You filled your nights with overthinking, trying to make sense of it all, trying to make it stop hurting, without really knowing what it even was. You kept chasing distractions, not because you were careless, but because you were scared. Scared that if you finally stopped, everything you'd buried would rise to the surface. All the heartbreak you ignored, all the wounds you left untreated, all the questions you never wanted to ask Allah out loud. So you ran into people, into screens, into overworking, into anything that could keep you numb. And while you were running, Allah was watching, not to punish you, but to wait. Because Allah never chases you like people do. He doesn't flood your inbox. He doesn't beg you to remember Him. He simply waits. until your soul finally gets tired of everywhere else it's been running to. And the moment you stopped, the moment you paused, alone in your room, tears in your eyes, chest tight, asking, "Why do I feel so lost?" That's when he stepped in, because Allah doesn't come when you're distracted. He comes when you're ready, and sometimes readiness doesn't look like strength. It looks like surrender, when you finally let go of the people who were draining you. When you stop trying to look strong and admit, "Ya Allah, I'm breaking." When you cry not because you're weak, but because you're finally real. That's when the connection begins. Allah didn't force you to stop. He allowed the things you were running toward to fall apart. He allowed the fake friendships to collapse. He let the plans fall through, not because he didn't love you, but because he loved you enough to let you fall. So you'd finally fall into his arms. You don't realize it. But the moment you stopped running was the moment Allah opened the door. You didn't knock, you collapsed at the doorstep, and he still welcomed you. That's how merciful your Lord is. He lets you run. He lets you choose other paths. He lets you explore other loves. But when they fail you, when you're left standing in the ruins of everything you thought would save you, he's still there, patient, silent, open-armed. Because sometimes the greatest gift is not that Allah stopped the pain, but that he waited until you were ready to bring the pain to him. He waited until your heart was raw enough to finally be honest. And now that you've stopped running, now that the distractions have faded, now that it's just you, your heart, and your Lord, he's not here to shame you. He's here to rebuild you. You were never too far. You were never too broken. You just weren't still enough to hear him calling your name. 3. You were becoming addicted to external noise. You didn't mean for it to happen. You didn't even realize it at first. But somewhere along the way, you became addicted to noise. Not just loud noise, but external noise. The kind that keeps you busy, distracted, disconnected from yourself. The kind that makes you scroll for hours, not for fun, but to escape. The kind that makes you talk, laugh, perform, not because you're okay, but because the silence feels too heavy to sit in. Every time it got too quiet, you'd reach for something. Your phone, a show, a playlist, a person, something, anything, to avoid facing the echo inside your own chest. Because silence was exposing. It reminded you of everything you didn't want to feel. The heartbreak, the confusion, the questions, the prayers you stopped making, the thoughts you were scared to finish, the parts of yourself you kept avoiding. So you stayed loud. You filled your day with conversations that didn't matter. You filled your mind with content that didn't heal. You filled your soul with everything except what it was actually starving for. And Allah watched it happen, not with anger, but with wisdom, because He knew the longer you stayed addicted to the outside, the further you drifted from what was dying inside. Your heart wasn't tired because of stress. It was tired from the performance, from pretending to be okay when you weren't, from living for likes, but longing for light, from staying visible to the world, but invisible to your own self. The problem wasn't that your life was too loud. The problem was that your soul was too quiet, and it was begging to be heard, begging to be remembered, begging for a moment of stillness where you could finally meet you again. So Allah began to strip it all away, not to hurt you, but to detox you from the notifications, from the fake friendships, from the comparison, from the shallow attachments. One by one, the things that kept you distracted started to disappear. Because healing doesn't begin in chaos. It begins in stillness. It begins when the music stops, when the messages slow down, when the world stops clapping, and you're finally alone enough to hear the whisper, "Come back to me." You don't need more noise. You don't need another distraction. You need quiet. You need sujood. You need the Qur'an to speak to your wound, not the world to distract you from it. Because silence isn't empty, it's sacred. And sometimes Allah will mute everything around you, so that the only voice left is His. 4. The version of you that needed approval had to die. You kept trying to be what they wanted. You adjusted your voice. You softened your boundaries. You smiled when you wanted to scream. You said yes when your soul was begging you to say no. Why? Because somewhere deep inside, you believed that love had to be earned, that in order to be kept, you had to shrink, that your presence was only safe if it was pleasing. So you kept shape-shifting. You became smaller, quieter, easier to handle. You weren't being yourself, you were being approved of. You thought this was strength. You thought this was kindness. You thought this was what being a good person looked like. But deep inside, a different truth was brewing. You were exhausted. Exhausted from performing a version of you that didn't exist. Exhausted from apologizing for how much you feel. Exhausted from hiding the parts of you that wanted to be seen without conditions. And that exhaustion, it wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual, because Allah didn't create you to live for people's approval. He created you to live in His pleasure, and that looks very different. So slowly, Allah started breaking that version of you, the one that kept sacrificing truth to keep peace, the one that kept holding in tears to protect someone else's comfort, the one that kept saying, "I'm fine," when you were drowning inside. That version wasn't you, it was your wound. It was the child inside you who thought they had to be perfect to be loved. It was the teen who learned that speaking up meant being rejected. It was the adult who carried everyone's pain but never knew where to place her own. And Allah, Al-Latif, the most gentle, began removing the layers, not all at once, but in heartbreaks, in silence, in rejection, in situations that forced you to finally see. This version of me was never real. It was never mine. It was survival. You didn't lose people. You lost the identity that was attached to their validation. You didn't lose your worth. You lost the habit of proving it, and as painful as it was, that death was necessary. Because sometimes Allah has to let a false version of you collapse, so He can rebuild the one He always intended you to be. The real you, the one who speaks honestly, the one who feels deeply without apology, the one who remembers that your value was written before you were born, not negotiated after. You were never created to be someone's safe option. You were created to be a servant of the Most High, and no version of you that lives in fear of people's rejection can ever carry the light that was meant to come through you. So if everything is falling apart, if you no longer recognize yourself, if the approval you once lived for doesn't taste the same, it's not because you're broken, it's because you're being born again. And this time, it's for Allah, not for them. 5. You can't hear divine instructions in a crowded room. You've been asking for answers, begging for clarity, crying, "Ya Allah, just give me a sign, tell me what to do." But maybe the sign was already there. Maybe it's not that Allah hasn't spoken. It's that your world has been too loud to hear Him. Your life has been full, too full. Full of opinions, full of noise, full of other people's voices telling you what you should be, what you should want, what you should chase, what makes you worthy. But in all that sound, you lost the voice that matters most, the one that comes when everything else goes quiet. Because Allah doesn't shout. He speaks into the space after everything else goes silent. He speaks in the stillness of a heart that's finally stopped panicking. He speaks in the quiet of a soul that's finally ready to listen, not perform. And maybe that's why He removed the people you used to run to for advice. That's why the plans you were obsessed with fell apart. That's why the opportunities stopped. That's why the phone doesn't ring as much. It's not rejection. It's reduction to create room for revelation, because you can't hear divine instruction. In a crowded room, you can't receive sacred guidance while entertaining distractions. You can't become who Allah wrote you to be while carrying the weight of who everyone else wants you to be. So Allah begins to shrink your circle, not to isolate you, but to instruct you, to strip away the voices that confuse you, to silence the advice that keeps you in fear, to remove the people who speak louder than your Lord in your heart. It hurts, doesn't it? To go from always needed to silence, to go from always busy to still, to go from always planning to paused. But that pause, that stillness you're fighting against, that's where the instructions are. You keep saying, "Ya Allah, guide me." And He is, but His guidance is precise, and precision requires quiet. Distraction will never lead you to destiny. Only presence will, and maybe that's why the silence in your life is growing. Because He's about to reveal something, not in noise, not in chaos, but in calm. Something sacred, something that will only make sense when you're no longer trying to impress the world, and finally ready to obey the one who created it. This is your instruction season. That's why you feel so distant from everyone else, because the next version of you is being built directly from His voice, not theirs. So don't rush to fill the silence. Don't go back to the noise. Don't beg for a crowd that can't carry your calling. Stay here in this quiet, because what's coming next requires your full attention. 6. You keep asking for purpose, but purpose comes through pain. You keep asking Allah for purpose. Ya Allah, show me why I'm here. What am I meant to do? What is my mission? But maybe the answer isn't in a book or a career or a single lightning bolt moment of inspiration. Maybe the answer is in the pain you've been trying to escape. You've been looking for purpose like it's something outside of you, but Allah has been planting it inside the very struggles you keep praying would end. You think purpose will feel like clarity, but it often begins with collapse. The job that didn't work out, the friendship that ended, the version of you that no longer fits, the breakdown you hid from the world. But what if that breakdown was the birthplace of your real story? Allah knows how to write purpose through pain, and that's why He lets certain things fall apart, not to destroy you, but to disconnect you from who you were never meant to stay. You were becoming too attached to ease, too dependent on people, too addicted to plans that made sense on paper, but suffocated your soul. So Allah let you get uncomfortable. He let the rug be pulled. He allowed the storm, not because He was far from you, but because He was shaping something far greater inside you. You think purpose is something that comes when life is peaceful, but real purpose is born in the fire. It comes when your heart is so shattered that the only way to move forward is to become someone new. That's when your du'as change. That's when your eyes start seeing differently. That's when your heart starts filtering who's meant to stay and who's not. That's when you finally stop living for people and start living for Allah. Every broken relationship taught you how to love from the soul, not the ego. Every delay taught you patience that couldn't be learned in ease. Every unanswered prayer, it was shaping your submission, not just your expectations. You wanted purpose without pressure. But diamonds aren't formed in comfort, they're forged in crushing force. And maybe that's what this season is for you. Not punishment, but pressure. Not rejection, but refinement. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're just standing at the entrance of the path you asked for. And to walk it, the old version of you has to be stripped, not because you're unworthy, but because your calling is too sacred to carry extra weight. So if it hurts right now, if life feels confusing, if everything you thought was certain has been shaken, don't step back. Step into the fire, into the silence, into the obedience, because this is where your real mission begins, the one written in pain, but sealed in purpose, the one that makes your entire past make sense. And one day, you'll look back and realize the pain that nearly broke you was actually the moment Allah handed you your assignment. 7. You're not in isolation, you're in intimate conversation. You keep telling yourself you're alone, that nobody checks on you, nobody sees what you're going through, nobody understands what it's like to cry at night and then act like you're fine in the morning. And maybe it's true. Maybe the world doesn't know what's happening inside you. Maybe the people closest to you have no idea how heavy it's been. Maybe they don't ask. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they've moved on. But Allah hasn't. Because you're not in isolation. You're in intimate conversation. Every tear you've shed in secret, He caught it. Every thought you couldn't put into words, He understood it. Every time you whispered, "Ya Allah, I don't even know what to say anymore," He listened, not as a distant Lord, but as the closest one to your heart. The silence you feel around you is not a punishment. It's a holy space, a spiritual echo chamber, where your soul is finally having a raw, uninterrupted dialogue with its Creator. And maybe that's why He pulled people away. Maybe that's why the conversations dried up. Maybe that's why no one's calling like they used to. Because the most important conversation of your life is not between you and them, it's between you and Him. Do you remember that night when you cried so hard on the prayer mat you couldn't speak? And your voice cracked between sobs as you tried to pray, but only tears came out. That wasn't weakness. That was worship. That wasn't silence. That was the sound of your heart speaking directly to the one who never needed your words, only your presence. You're not in isolation. You're in a sacred sanctuary where there are no distractions, no performances, no pretending, just your soul, your scars, and your sustainer. You keep waiting for someone to come rescue you from the emptiness. But Allah has already stepped in. He's not asking you to fix it all. He's not asking you to have answers. He's asking you to be real, to come to Him exactly as you are. Not perfect, not polished, not pretending, just present. Because when you finally strip away all the filters, the masks, the expectations, that's when the divine conversation begins. It's not loud, it's not poetic, it's not planned, it's intimate. The kind of closeness that heals without words, the kind of love that fills you when no one else is looking, the kind of mercy that reaches places inside you that even you forgot existed. So no, you're not in isolation, you're in intention. Allah has chosen this stillness for you, so you'd finally sit with your soul. So you'd finally stop chasing answers from the world and start listening for them in His presence. This isn't a breakdown, it's a divine conversation. And right now, in your tears, you are being heard more clearly than ever before. 8. You had to be alone, so you'd finally return home. You didn't want to be alone. You didn't ask for this silence. You didn't expect that the people you loved would drift, that the plans you trusted would dissolve, that the version of life you imagined would disappear before your eyes. And yet, here you are, alone. Not lonely, but alone in a way that scares you. Because for the first time, there's no one left to distract you from yourself. At first it felt like abandonment, like you were being pushed out of every room you once belonged in. Like Allah was taking things away from you without explanation. Like life was shutting you out, and you didn't understand why. But slowly, something else started happening. In the quiet, in the pause, In the long nights where no one called and no one noticed you were hurting, you began to hear something, not outside you, but inside. A stillness, a presence, a whisper from deep within saying, "This isn't exile, this is homecoming." Because you were drifting, maybe not in sin, but in distraction. You were chasing peace in people who were just passing through. You were giving your energy to things that drained your soul. You were asking creation for something only the Creator could give. So Allah, in His mercy, pulled you back. Not forcefully, not suddenly, but slowly, by closing doors, by making the noise too loud to bear, by allowing certain people to fade, until there was only one direction left to turn, and that direction was up. You weren't being rejected, you were being redirected. Back to sujood, back to silence, back to the version of you that doesn't perform, it just remembers. Because the truth is, you were always meant to return, to come back to the one who never left, to the one who heard your heart even when your lips couldn't form the words, to the one who watched you break and quietly prepared a healing you couldn't even imagine yet. Your isolation isn't emptiness. It's an invitation to come home, to be still, to stop searching for belonging in people who were never designed to be your home, and to finally let Allah rebuild the foundation you once built on sand. Yes, you had to be alone, because you would have never come back otherwise. You would have stayed busy. You would have stayed distracted. You would have kept chasing temporary warmth, while your soul froze quietly beneath the surface. So Allah, Al-Hakim, the Most Wise, let the world grow cold so you'd run back into His warmth. And now you're home. Not because everything's perfect, but because you're no longer lost. And that is the most sacred kind of peace there is. So if tonight you feel alone, like Allah has closed every door, silenced every voice, and left you in the dark, then know this: it's not darkness. It's a tunnel, and He is not punishing you. He's preparing to reintroduce you to yourself. You're not being hidden, you're being held. And when Allah wants your full attention, it means something sacred is about to be revealed. They didn't just leave you. They left you right when you needed them most. And you've been blaming yourself ever since. But what if their exit wasn't rejection? What if it was sacred timing? Because Allah doesn't always remove people to hurt you. He removes them to reveal you. You're not falling apart, you're being stripped down, so He can rebuild the version of you they never deserved to witness. This isn't the end of your story, it's the moment your real one begins. One, Allah let you feel the shift, so you'd stop trusting vibes over truth. You felt something shift, but you kept brushing it off. You noticed how their tone changed, how their eyes didn't light up for you like they used to. The conversations got shorter, the warmth got colder. They still showed up, yes, but something about their presence stopped feeling like safety and started feeling like survival. You told yourself not to overthink it, that maybe you were just being sensitive, that maybe they were just tired. But deep down your heart whispered, this isn't what it used to be. And still, you held on. You held on to the memories, to the good moments, to the hope that maybe things would return to how they once were. But they didn't, because what you were holding on to was no longer real. They had already left the relationship in spirit. They were already gone in energy, but their body stayed long enough to confuse your heart. And so, in His mercy, Allah let the uneasiness grow. He let the silence between you two become heavier. He let your spirit start to ache when you were near them. Not to punish you, but to protect you. You see, you kept trusting the vibes. How they smiled once, how they supported you before, how they made you laugh that one time when you really needed it. But what you didn't see was how they started making you question your voice. How they rolled their eyes when you shared something sincere. How they stayed quiet when you needed support the most. You were shrinking, just to keep the connection alive, and Allah saw it. He saw how you were breaking silently, just to keep something that was no longer serving your soul. And because you wouldn't walk away, He made the room uncomfortable. He made the conversations awkward. He let the tension grow thicker, because He knew you were too loyal to release what was already dead. So He pulled the curtain. He let their disinterest show. He let your heart feel the ache. And He let their silence speak louder than their words. Because sometimes Allah doesn't whisper. He withholds peace to make you notice what you've been avoiding. You needed truth, not comfort. And Allah, in His love for you, let everything false slowly fall apart. Now it hurts. You miss who they used to be. You replay the old moments and ask yourself, did I do something wrong? But no, this wasn't about punishment. It was about freedom. Allah didn't let them stay the same, because they were never meant to stay at all. And now you're here, confused, hurting, lonely, but more awake than ever, more honest than ever, more aligned than ever. What you called confusion was actually divine redirection. What you felt as abandonment was actually Allah pulling you away from a version of yourself that kept begging for love where there was none left. You didn't lose them. You lost the illusion that they were good for your soul. And that was the most merciful thing that could have ever happened. 2. They didn't exit. They evaporated when you outgrew the room. They were in. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't offer closure. They didn't explain what changed. They just faded, like fog when the sun rises, like background noise when your focus sharpens, like people who were never really anchored in the first place. And that's what hurt the most. Not the fight, not the betrayal, but the quiet disappearance. No last words, no honest reason, just slow, silent distance. Until one day it hit you. They're not here anymore. But what if that vanishing wasn't cruelty? What if it was clarity? Some people don't exit with drama. They evaporate. Because the truth is, you outgrew the room they were comfortable in. You shifted. You healed. You started walking in light. And their spirit couldn't survive in it. They were used to your wounds, not your wisdom. They were comfortable with the broken version of you, the one who needed them, chased them, bent your voice to keep their comfort intact. But the moment you began to honor yourself, their silence grew louder. Their distance grew faster. They didn't leave because you failed. They left because your growth made them irrelevant. When you were small, they stood tall beside you. But the moment your heart started rising, your dua got deeper. Your purpose got clearer and your voice stopped apologizing. They couldn't find their footing around you anymore. Because elevation doesn't always attract celebration. Sometimes it activates evaporation. And Allah, in His perfect knowledge, let them dissolve from your life quietly. No noise, no warnings, just a slow fade. So you wouldn't chase, so you wouldn't cling, so you could finally realize they were only ever meant to walk with the version of you that was still hiding. They were a chapter, not the whole story. And that chapter had reached its last page. But because your heart was still attached, Allah didn't let them slam the door. He let them disappear instead. So you'd sit with your silence and say, I guess I'm not who I used to be anymore. And that is the real miracle. You're not abandoned. You're transformed. You're not empty. You're becoming. They didn't walk out. You just walked up. And now that you're standing at a different altitude, you finally understand why they couldn't breathe beside you anymore. Some souls are allergic to light. Some spirits decay in truth. And some people were only sent to your life to teach you how to release without resentment. They didn't exit. They expired. And your evolution was the quiet fire. that made the false attachments burn away. So don't cry over who evaporated. Smile because Allah just made room for someone your next chapter won't have to dim your light for. 3. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was the doorway to divine proof. You could have exposed them. You could have told everyone what they did. You had the proof, the receipts, the wounds. You could have screamed, but instead, you went quiet. And that silence felt like the loneliest sound in the world. Because you weren't silent because you didn't care. You were silent because you did. You were silent because you were raised with dignity. You were silent because your heart still hoped they'd come back and make it right. You were silent because you didn't want to embarrass them, even though they had no problem humiliating you. They lied. They twisted the truth. They played victim while you carried the weight of a story you never got to tell. You stood in the fire dash and chose not to throw flames back. And it hurt. Not because you didn't have words, but because you had every word. And still chose to stay above it. But here's what you didn't see. In the unseen realm, Allah was watching, and what you thought was weakness was actually a witness. Every time you stayed silent when you could have exposed, every time you wiped your own tears instead of begging for justice, every time you fell into sujood and whispered your heartbreak only to Him, you weren't alone. You were being recorded by angels who write down restraint like victory. Allah saw the battles you fought with your tongue, the storms you calmed with your patience, the dignity you held when your heart was bleeding in secret. And while the world misunderstood your silence, Allah was raising your rank because of it. You didn't stay quiet because you were weak. You stayed quiet because you knew, if Allah is the one who defends you, no human validation matters. And that's why everything they built with lies is now cracking under the weight of truth, bit by bit, silently, perfectly. Because when Allah defends you, He doesn't make noise, He makes results. So stop regretting the words you never said. Stop thinking you should have fought dirt with dirt. You weren't a coward. You were chosen to win a different way. Through silence, through grace, through divine patience that most people don't have the strength to hold. And now your silence has become your shield. Not because you were weak, but because you were strong enough not to let them make you like them. And what they don't know is, every moment you stayed quiet, Allah was building something for you. A door they can't enter, a table they can't sit at, a peace they'll never understand. So let them keep their version of the story. Let them tell the world what makes them feel righteous. Let them laugh while they think they got away with it. Because what's coming for you will speak louder than your silence ever could. You didn't lose when you stayed quiet. You won something deeper, divine proof that your character was built for Jannah. 4. They didn't just hurt you. They tried to rewrite who you were. They didn't just hurt you. They tried to rewrite you, piece by piece, quietly, subtly, strategically, not by attacking you directly, but by slowly making you doubt yourself. It started with small comments. Why are you like this? You always overthink. You're too soft. Don't be so emotional. And before you realized it, you stopped showing your full self. You started hesitating before you spoke. You started watering down your dreams, second-guessing your intentions, and questioning your worth. That's how it happens. Not through loud violence, but through quiet erosion of your voice, your identity, your spirit. They didn't just betray you. They unbuilt you while pretending to care. And the most dangerous part, you almost believed them. You almost believed you were too much. You almost believed your sincerity was weak. You almost apologized for your light because they taught you that shining made you selfish. But here's what saved you. Allah didn't let the lie stick. He let you spiral, yes. He let you fall silent for a while. But he never let you become the version of yourself they were trying to create. Because Allah authored your soul, not them. And when someone tries to edit a soul Allah wrote with his own hands, the ink doesn't change. It resists. It fights back in the quiet. It whispers in your chest, "This isn't who you are. Come back." So you started to return, not in a loud, rebellious way, but in quiet moments of remembering. You remembered how your kindness was once a gift, not a burden. You remembered how your emotions were signs of depth, not flaws. You remembered that being loyal, soft, and sincere isn't foolish. It's sacred. And when that remembering began, Allah made everything they tried to twist begin to unravel. Because when He protects you, He doesn't just shield your body. He shields your identity. You see, this was never just heartbreak. This was an attempt to replace your reflection with their opinion. They couldn't handle your purity, so they tried to stain it. They couldn't match your sincerity, so they mocked it. They couldn't rise to your frequency, so they tried to convince you that you were broken. But Allah said, "Not this one." He let you hurt, but He didn't let you lose yourself. And now, you're rebuilding, slowly, sacredly. And this time, you're building with truth, not their approval. So next time you wonder, why did it hurt this much? Know this, because it wasn't just a breakup. It was a battle for your soul's shape, and you, by the mercy of Allah, won. You didn't just survive. You remained you. And in a world full of masks, that's a victory no one can fake. 5. Their loyalty had an expiration date. But you were building for eternity. You were loyal with your whole heart. Not because you had to, but because that's how Allah made you. You stayed when it got inconvenient. You forgave what others said you shouldn't. You prayed for them behind their back. You made room in your life for them, even when it meant shrinking yourself. You were building something timeless, a bond that could last into the next life. Because to you, love wasn't casual, it was sacred. But to them, it was seasonal. They came close when they needed warmth. They showed up when you were useful. They wore the face of family, but treated you like a spare option, and you felt it. Even when you couldn't explain it. The way they pulled back when your heart opened more. The way their energy shifted when you talked about long-term, meaningful things. It wasn't that you loved too deeply. It was that they loved too temporarily. They were playing in the shallow end, while you were pouring your soul into the foundation of something eternal. A connection that honored Allah, a relationship that could carry into Jannah, a loyalty that didn't expire with convenience. But Allah saw what you couldn't. He saw the imbalance. He saw how you were building with bricks while they were playing with paper. So He stepped in, not to punish you, but to protect your future. Because you don't build palaces with people who only want to rent rooms. And your heart was never meant to be a hotel for visitors who had no intention of staying. That's why they started withdrawing when you became more sincere. That's why they flinched when you brought up Allah in the conversation. That's why they slowly distanced themselves when you stopped being fun and started being real. They weren't loyal, they were convenient. And the moment things required depth, patience, sacrifice, their presence expired. And it's okay to grieve that. It's okay to feel the ache of giving your best to someone who never intended to match it. But don't blame your loyalty. Don't call yourself foolish. Don't regret being real. Because Allah never wastes sincerity. They may have walked away, but your loyalty was recorded. Your patience was seen. Your tears were counted, and what they treated like too much was actually the reason Allah is preparing someone better, someone who doesn't fear depth, someone who speaks your name in their dua, someone whose soul is also building for eternity. because you weren't made for half-love, temporary bonds, or shallow connections. You were made to reflect a loyalty that comes from the heavens. A loyalty that doesn't break when life gets hard. A loyalty that doesn't disappear when you're no longer easy to love. So let them go, not in anger, not in bitterness, but with a heart that finally understands. They weren't disloyal because you lacked something. They were disloyal because their heart was never meant to build what your soul was born to carry. Your loyalty had no expiration date, and that's exactly why Allah is writing you into a different story now. One where the love is not rushed, not forced, not conditional, but eternal. 6. Their distance wasn't rejection, it was spiritual recoil. They didn't block you, they didn't scream at you, and they didn't even explain, they just pulled away. Step by step, message by message, until the silence between you was louder than any argument you ever had. And you kept wondering, what did I do wrong? You replayed every conversation. You overanalyzed every text. You looked back at every moment you opened your heart, searching for the line you might have crossed. But what if you didn't do anything wrong? What if their distance wasn't a sign of your failure, but a reaction to your light? You didn't scare them with your mistakes. You made them uncomfortable with your growth. When you were soft, uncertain, still figuring yourself out, they loved it. It made them feel needed. It kept the power balanced in their favor. But when you started healing, when you stopped apologizing for your emotions, when you started mentioning Allah more, when your dreams got bigger and your soul got clearer, they didn't know how to be around you anymore, because your healing became a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. Your presence started showing them everything they hadn't dealt with. Your peace started exposing their inner chaos. Your clarity highlighted their confusion. Your sincerity made their excuses feel thinner. Your strength made their avoidance harder to justify. And so they recoiled, not because you hurt them, but because their soul wasn't ready to face what you had already begun to confront. It wasn't rejection, it was spiritual recoil, because the closer you came to Allah, the further they felt from your frequency. You wanted connection, they wanted comfort. You were rising, they were resisting. And in the unseen, Allah knew. If they stayed close, they'd start dragging you back into the darkness you just crawled out of. So He allowed the distance, not to leave you lonely, but to keep you protected, because your spirit was becoming too clean for polluted attachments. Your future was getting too serious for casual souls. Your light was becoming too real for people still hiding in shadows. And now, you're here. Heart aching, mind racing, trying to understand how people who once felt so close could feel like strangers overnight. But maybe the real question isn't, why did they distance themselves? Maybe the question is, why was I still trying to carry someone Allah already removed from my path? They didn't reject you. They couldn't stay in a presence that made their conscience whisper louder. And that's not your burden to carry. You didn't push them away. You just grew in a direction they refused to follow. And sometimes Allah will let that hurt. So you never chase someone who was running from your light to begin with. So stop blaming yourself. Stop editing your softness. Stop shrinking your faith to make others feel okay staying small, because the distance wasn't the enemy. The distance was the filter. And what's meant for your soul will never recoil from your truth. 7. Allah didn't let them stay, because their hands would have touched what was meant to be sacred. You thought they would be there for the breakthrough. You thought they'd clap when the storm ended. You imagined them standing next to you when the doors opened, when the du'as finally came true. You prayed for them to stay. You even planned the future with them in it. And then, without warning, they were gone. It felt cruel. Like they walked away right before the best part of your story. Like they left the movie before the ending got good. And you asked yourself, why would Allah take them away now? Now, when I'm finally healing. Now, when I'm finally finding my voice. Now, when I finally feel ready to receive what I prayed for. But what if the answer isn't in the pain? What if it's in the protection? What if Allah didn't let them stay? Because what's coming next is too sacred for their hands to touch. You see, you were about to bloom. You were about to step into a version of yourself that required clean energy, pure intention, and hearts that carried no secret agendas. And Allah, in His mercy, saw what you couldn't see. He saw the jealousy behind their smile. He saw the hidden intentions they would never say out loud. He saw how their presence would have poisoned your blessings, not through direct harm, but through quiet contamination. And so He removed them, not as a punishment to you, but as a wall of protection around what you were about to become. Because what's coming next isn't casual, it's divinely timed. It's not just your next opportunity. It's your soul's upgrade. It's your spiritual rebirth. It's the answer to the prayers you made in tears, in sujood, when no one else knew you were breaking. And those prayers require a clean environment to bloom in. So Allah cleared the space. He didn't just remove people. He protected purpose. He guarded your sacred becoming from hands that weren't meant to hold it. Because if they stayed, they would have taken credit for what was never theirs. They would have confused your healing for dependence. They would have diluted your joy with their doubt. They would have touched blessings they didn't pray for. And Allah doesn't let that happen to the ones He's handpicked for something special. So yes, it hurt. Yes, you questioned why they left right before everything changed. But now you see, it wasn't rejection, it was prevention. Some people aren't bad, they're just not built for what's coming. And if they were allowed to stay, they would have distracted your focus, disturbed your peace, and maybe even delayed your destiny. So Allah removed them like He removes dust from a lens. So you could see clearly. So nothing would block the view of what He's about to unfold. And now it's just you and the silence, you and the ache. But look closer. That silence is sacred. That ache is making room for something so pure, so precise, that even you don't fully understand it yet. But Allah does. And that's why He didn't let their hands touch it, because some blessings are too holy to be shared with unclean hearts. 8. Their exit didn't end your story. It triggered the version of you that was hidden. You thought their exit ended something, that when they left, a chapter closed. A dream died. A version of you collapsed that would never return. You sat in the silence they left behind. You cried over the unanswered questions. You begged Allah to bring them back. Not because they were perfect, but because you weren't ready to live in a world that didn't include them. But what you didn't see then was that their exit wasn't your ending. It was your activation. You didn't break. You opened. Not all pain is destruction. Some pain is divine surgery, the kind that removes what no longer serves you, to awaken what's been asleep for years inside you. Because who you became after they left was someone even you hadn't met yet. You started walking slower, but with more intention. You laughed less, but when you did, it came from somewhere real. You stopped explaining yourself to people who were never listening. You stopped chasing conversations where your voice was just background noise. And that stillness, that loneliness, that silence that once felt like a punishment, became the exact place where you met the undeniable truth of who you are. You didn't need to be chosen by them, because you were already chosen by Allah, and that truth didn't fully unlock until they left. Their absence wasn't a loss, it was a mirror. A mirror that forced you to look at everything you had buried. your fire, your dreams, your dignity, your voice. You see, while they were walking away, Allah was walking in, and where they used to fill space, now stands a version of you that is no longer apologizing for being too much, too soft, too loyal, too emotional, too sincere, because what they couldn't handle was exactly what made you powerful. And now, you rise different. You love different. You walk into rooms not hoping to be seen, but carrying a presence that can't be ignored. Not loud, but felt. Not desperate, but complete. And all of it. All of this becoming was triggered not by love, but by loss, by their exit, by the silence, by the space they left behind. They thought they ended you, but what they really did was wake you up. And now, they couldn't sit next to the version of you they helped activate, even if they wanted to. Not because you hate them, but because this version of you doesn't bend backwards anymore. This version of you prays deeper, speaks clearer, and walks lighter. This version of you has been through the fire and kept the faith. Their exit didn't end your story. It turned the page. And what's written next is authored only by Allah. So let the past stay where it belongs. Let the doors they closed stay closed, because the door Allah is opening for you now doesn't lead back to who you were. It leads forward to who you were always meant to become. So here you are, not broken, not bitter, just done pretending to walk with people who were never really walking beside you. They didn't betray you. They revealed who they were. And Allah revealed who you were becoming. Let them fade. Let them misunderstand. Let them go. Because the one who sees your sujood at 2 a.m., the one who watched your heart tear and still kept it beating, he's not done with you yet. This pain was a beginning, not a punishment, not a dead end. And what's coming next is too holy for anyone not sent by Allah.